If we may, we will start the proceedings. This is the first of the new school season presentations. I'm Steve Friedman. It's my privilege to introduce the General. But first, let me give you the lineup for the next 30 days or so of council events. On September 25th, Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister of Canada. On the 26th, Foreign Minister De Lima of Italy. On the 26th, President Karzai of Afghanistan. On the 27th, Prime Minister Erdogan of Turkey. And on the 27th, President Uribe of Colombia. And on October 1st, Foreign Minister Mukherjee of India. A stellar cast. Now it's going to be my pleasure to introduce the General. First, let me just give you the normal council ground rules for this type of meeting. Please turn off your cell phones and Blackberries and any other wireless devices. Remember, this meeting is very much on the record. In fact, it is being teleconferenced. Now, just brief words about Mike Hayden. Anyone here who's had the privilege of working with senior leadership in our uniformed military knows the talent that we're fortunate as a nation to have. Mike Hayden is one of the few people in our military history who's attained his 4th star as an Intel Pro, which is a measure of the esteem in which he's held by people who deal with him and by his leaders. For those who worry about the importance of truth being spoken to power, when it is on Hayden's watch, I think you have no need to fear. He is a very direct person, and today you'll all benefit from that. So let me just introduce General Mike Hayden.
Thank you, Steve. That's very kind. I'm almost overwhelmed by that lineup you had there. I assure you, I'm the leadoff hitter, and my only purpose is just get on base for the folks who are coming behind me. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's a pleasure to be in New York, to spend some time with such a distinguished group, and I'm looking out here seeing a lot of familiar faces and old friends, and an opportunity to talk about the organization I actually have the privilege to lead, the Central Intelligence Agency. We're an organization with a clear objective to protect the American people. We have a number of missions that feed into that to protect America. And one of those missions we share with the Council, which is to help our policymakers make sense of global events. The range of issues before us both are as wide as the world we both study. Nuclear proliferation, emerging security threats, the rise of new economic centers, scramble for natural resources, and the list goes on. Our nation counts on us to have the expertise and the insight to flag the risks and the opportunities that lie ahead, and to keep our eye on all the critical international concerns that face our nation right now. But of the subjects we cover, none commands more attention than terrorism. I think it's very unlikely that there'll ever come a time when a CIA director visits New York and his or her thoughts aren't shaped by 9/11. We're at war, and this city, still strong and vibrant, has been a battlefield in that war. Now, I don't make a lot of public speeches. That's probably the way it should be for someone in my line of work. But I actually asked Richard and the Council to be able to speak to you today. Like anyone who feels deeply about the safety and well-being of his countrymen and the value and the integrity of his colleagues, I believe there are some things that need to be said. Let me repeat that. Like anyone who feels deeply about the safety and well-being of his countrymen and the value and integrity of his colleagues, there are things that should be said, and sometimes our citizens should hear them from the person who's running their Central Intelligence Agency. So this afternoon, I want to talk to you about the agency, the new kind of war that our nation has asked us to fight, and something I'm going to call the question of space. If you take nothing else from what I say here this afternoon, I hope it will be this. Our agency, CIA, operates only within the space given to us by the American people. That's how we want it to be, and that's how it should be. That space is defined by the policymakers that we all elect and by the laws our representatives pass. But once the laws are passed and the boundaries are set, the American people expect CIA to use every inch we're given to protect our fellow citizens. So let's talk a little bit about that space. The intelligence services of free societies operate within strict limits. To my way of thinking, those boundaries here in America reflect the principles of the republic that are most worth defending. We at CIA work very hard to live up to them, even as we operate in the shadow world of espionage. That sets up a natural tension. But frankly, for us, that's simply the cost of doing business. Our agency is convinced, absolutely convinced, that it's our obligation to conform to the needs of our free society and not vice versa. That's the society that we all signed up to defend. So no matter what the external threat is, we at CIA feel just as strongly as any American that our DNA as a nation must not, cannot be altered. But unlike most Americans, it's also our responsibility to confront that external threat unceasingly, every minute of every hour. And that, too, is an obligation that we at CIA feel very acutely. So let me make very clear how my agency views the fight at hand. I think it speaks to what a lot of Americans believe as well. But here's how we see it. Our nation is in a state of armed conflict with Al-Qaeda and its affiliates. It's a conflict that is global in scope, and a precondition for winning that conflict is to take the fight to the enemy wherever he may be. From my vantage point, measured by the required intensity of effort or the profound nature of the threat, it's very hard to see this thing as anything less than war. I've seen public references to, quote, the so-called war on terrorism or, quote, the Bush administration's war on terrorism. But for us, it's simply war. It's a word we use commonly without ambiguity in the halls at the Pentagon and at Langley. We who study and target this enemy see a danger more real than anything our citizens at home have confronted since our Civil War. And even when you consider the Cold War and mutually assured destruction in which the potential danger was actually catastrophic, the fact is the destruction never came. This war is different. In a very real sense, anyone who lives or works in a major city is as much a potential target as the victims of 9/11 or the London subway bombings or the strikes in Madrid or any of the other operations we've seen in Morocco, Jordan, Indonesia, Algeria, Pakistan, Kenya, and elsewhere. That's my take on the strategic threat we face, and that's without the precise language of a national intelligence estimate. But the National Intelligence Council did publish its findings on that threat to the homeland earlier this summer. You had analysts from CIA and from throughout the intelligence community engage in a very careful, meticulous study of the issues based on their expertise and based on both open and classified sources. And I think they did a good job, and I have tremendous respect for their work. And for us here this afternoon, I'd like to draw from their judgments to the extent I can in this public setting. First, our analysts assess with high confidence that Al-Qaeda's central leadership is planning high-impact plots against the American homeland. Second, those same analysts assess, again with high confidence, that Al-Qaeda has protected or regenerated key elements of its homeland attack capability. That means safe haven in the tribal areas of Pakistan. That means operational lieutenants. And that means a top leadership engaged in planning. Al-Qaeda's success with that last remaining element, which is planning operatives in this country, is less certain. And third, we assess, once again with high confidence, that Al-Qaeda is focusing on targets that would produce mass casualties, dramatic destruction, and significant economic aftershocks. I want to be as clear as I can about the danger we face, and I want to do that for two reasons. First, I'm the CIA director, and warning about foreign threats to our security is actually part of my job. But second, in discussing the operational space available to my agency, I want to explain to you and through you to the American people exactly why we feel so strongly about using every inch we have been given. We bear responsibility for standing watch on this threat. That fact alone has the very distinct effect of focusing the mind. But we bear an additional responsibility as well. We're charged with prosecuting an expeditionary campaign to actually help capture or kill those behind the threat. And this is a form of warfare unlike any other in our country's history. It's an intelligence war as much as a military one. Actually, maybe it's an intelligence war more than it's a military one. In the post-9/11 era, intelligence is more crucial to the security of the Republic than ever before. Now that's, I recognize, a pretty sweeping assertion, so let me try to spell out what I mean with maybe an historical analogy. I mentioned mutually assured destruction in the Cold War. If that war ever came, the Soviet Union's most deadly forces, ICBMs, tank armies, they were actually relatively easy to find, but they were very hard to kill. Intelligence was important, don't get me wrong, but intelligence was overshadowed by the need for raw, sheer firepower. Today, the situation is reversed. We're now in an age in which our primary adversary is easy to kill. He's just very hard to find. So you can understand why so much emphasis in the last 5 years has been placed on intelligence. Moreover, the moment of an enemy's attack may be just that, a moment, a split second, the time it takes for an airliner to crash or a bomb to detonate. There can be little or no time to defeat him on the battlefield he's chosen. But behind that point of attack, behind that battlefield he's picked, is a trail. It's a trail of planning, travel, communications, training, and all of the other elements that go into a large-scale terrorist operation. This is where there are secrets we can steal, operatives we can capture and interrogate, plots we can and must disrupt. That's the theater of operations for America's clandestine intelligence service. That's where the American people expect us to fight. And in this fight, we've leveraged every inch of the space we've been given to operate. I want to briefly discuss two important aspects of our post-9/11 operations to put them into proper perspective. They have to do with that space question. The first is our rendition, detention, and interrogation programs. And then I want to talk a little bit about our close collaboration with allied intelligence services. Now, the first thing you need to know about those renditions, detentions, and interrogations programs, which I should add are very carefully controlled and lawfully conducted, is that although I'm talking about them today, they are hardly the centerpiece of our effort. Nor are they nearly as big as some think. But the intelligence they've produced is absolutely irreplaceable. And that intelligence has been used not only by this nation's national security agencies, but by our fellow members of the Atlantic Alliance and other allies. It's been crucial in giving us a better understanding of the enemy we face, as well as leads on taking other terrorists off the battlefield. Intelligence is sometimes described as analogous to putting the pieces of a puzzle together, except we hardly ever get to see the picture on the top of the box. The individuals that we detain provide us with a bunch of new puzzle pieces. But most importantly, very often, they have seen the picture on the top of the box. For example, that national intelligence estimate I mentioned earlier about threats to the homeland, in terms of its judgments and assumptions, is actually informed by the intelligence we've obtained from our detention program. More than 70% of the human intelligence reporting used in that estimate is based on information from detainees. A year and a day ago, the President publicly acknowledged the existence of CIA's detention and interrogation program. Since it began with the capture of Abu Zubaydah in the spring of 2002, fewer than 100 people have been detained at CIA's facilities. And I mentioned renditions. The number of renditions, that's moving a terrorist from A to B, apart from that 100 that we've detained, the number of renditions is actually even a smaller number, mid-range 2 figures. These programs are targeted and they are selective. They were designed only for the most dangerous terrorists and those believed to have the most valuable information, such as knowledge of planned attacks. But they've also been the subject of wild speculation, both here and overseas. A case in point, a European Parliament temporary committee has claimed that, and I'm quoting now, at least 1,245 flights operated by the CIA flew into European airspace or stopped over at European airports between the end of 2001 and the end of 2005. And the report said so in a context that implied that many or even most of these were rendition flights. The actual number of rendition flights ever flown by CIA is a tiny fraction of that. And the suggestion that even a substantial number of those 1,245 flights were carrying detainees is frankly absurd on its face. What did some of these flights carry? Could be equipment to support our people in the field. Could be documents that we're sharing with our allies.